Hello, I'm Jennifer Griffin, National Security Correspondent for Fox News Channel. Welcome to our discussion of the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Boeing and the Wounded Warrior Project. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center and spotlights the experience of several extraordinary Americans, both those wounded and injured while serving and those working on their behalf. Our opening segment focuses on the role adaptive sports play in warriors' recovery and celebrates several athletes who have found recent success competing in the 2022 Invictus Games and Warrior Games. Joining us in this first segment are Matt Cable, Montana National Guard, and recipient of 7 medals each at the Invictus and Warrior Games. Jack DeLue, Army veteran of Afghanistan, and winner of 3 medals at the 2022 Warrior Games. August O'Neill, Tech Sergeant with the United States Air Force and 5-time medalist at Invictus 2022. And Joel Rodriguez, Army veteran and multi-sport athlete at the 2022 Warrior Games and Invictus Games with a passion for wheelchair rugby. And James Herrera, Vice President of Physical Health and Wellness for our co-presenting sponsor, Wounded Warrior Project. Welcome, gentlemen. Matt, let's start with you. In 2014, you were diagnosed with a very aggressive leukemia. You spent almost 18 days in a coma. You didn't think you would survive. Then you started training. Then NBC called and you went, The Rock Johnson wanted you on the Titan Games. Then you deployed and you found out your cancer had come back because there was a great oncologist deployed with you. Tell me about your journey and how adaptive sports really helped you.
Well, first I want to say it's an honor to be here and be able to share my story with you all. Diagnosed 2014. After diagnosis, I went ICU in a coma. Woke up, didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I was very strange state, but I knew I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to work out. I wanted to get that fire back, fire burning, and so that's what I did. One day at a time, I continued training every day. Look in the mirror, and I just had to tell myself, you know, I'd come back. It's going to come back, and so that's what I did. Each day, just one foot in front of the other, put in the work, and eventually I found myself on The Rock's television show, The Titan Games. After my deployment, or during my deployment, when I got that call, or when I got the news that I relapsed, you know, the first thing in my head was like, all right, I got to beat it again. Let's do this thing. I knew I could do it. You know, I knew it was going to be a battle. This time around, I knew I needed a bone marrow transplant. And so I had that in the back of my head, like, all right, I gotta fight really hard and get through this for my family, for my loved ones, for everyone who's looked up to me. I gotta fight. And so that's what I did. Had my transplant, was then my blood wasn't reproducing for about 11 months post-transplant, and so I was getting 2 transfusions a week for 11 months. Definitely put, it was challenging. I was trying to train, but it's really hard when my hemoglobin is only half of what it should be. So I did what I could. Then I got the call about making the Invictus Games team, and it gave me confidence.
Which sports were you participating in?
So track and field, indoor rowing, powerlifting. And for track, it was the 200 meter dash, the 4x100 meter dash relay, the 1 minute row and the 4 minute row, and also powerlifting. And I love all those events. And the thing is, the way I train all those events in my training sessions and whatnot. So I was able to kind of be ahead of the game and just continue training and grinding. But yeah, when I got the news about Invictus, it was, all right, you know, I have something to fight for again, competition-wise, because I hadn't, you know, competed really heavily since my transplant. So I wanted to see what I could do, and it gave me confidence to be able to fight and battle back and give me something to fight for and work for, and to get that fire burning again. And that's what it did. Went to Invictus, had an amazing time, not only just, you know, competing, but seeing all the other athletes around, them going through similar stories, you know, battles, mentally and physically, and just seeing like their smile and their hard work and determination, what they've gone through to get to where they're at. It was inspiring and humble at the same time.
7 medals later.
7 medals later, yes, ma'am. So Invictus was amazing and a great opportunity. Fast forward like 2 months, I qualified for the Warrior Games. Same thing. This time it was in Orlando. It was all branches of service, including Canada and
Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine. So Ukraine, Canada, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Yeah.
What message did you have to the Ukrainian soldiers that you were? I mean, they must be in a different space than maybe
Oh
even
man,
you were.
they were just coming from battle. The battlefield. Literally, they flew in from the battlefield, and they wanted to compete and help with their recovery journey as well. And so, just seeing them, it was very emotional. And we gave them as much support as we could. It was cool that they were there, and just knowing their story and what they've been through.
So amazing, so amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
Jack, 2 motorcycle accidents. You had deployed to Afghanistan, East Wardock, but it was a motorcycle that caused your paralysis. Did you ever think that you would be competing in the Warrior Games?
Not a day in my life. I never imagined it, really. I knew of the Warrior Games because from my first motorcycle accident out in San Antonio, Texas, I was in the WTB. I knew of the Warrior Games, the trials and everything that you have to compete in to get selected to do that. And I did trials out there, didn't make it. Then I came here after my second motorcycle accident, and I got told about it. They're like, hey, you're going to trials. And so I went, continued to my best ability, and then when I got picked up for that, I trained for 6+ months, like Monday through Thursday, and it was like clockwork. And like he said, it gives you a goal to strive for, a goal to achieve, something to do the best you possibly can, and to prove to everyone else, not only yourself, but to everyone, that you're not going to let whatever your injury, illness, wounds, whatever they may be, you're not going to let it define you or let it break you. And so it just gave me something to work for. And to go down to the Warrior Games for the first time in Orlando, I was just blown away to see these guys and to see everyone else and their mentality and everything. And it's so positive and so addictive that you just want to do everything in your power not to be that negative influence. So everyone's in the best of spirits. The camaraderie is great, especially amongst like all the different branches.
So did you ever have any dark days?
I've had quite a few, especially from my first accident. This one, not so much, because it was just, everything was absolutely so surreal to me. And it's kind of hard to go from being as high speed as you possibly can to being like cooped up in a bed and you can't like feel 2/3 your body.
So how did you take that first step?
The first step towards the Warrior Games?
Yeah, to competing. It's archery and rowing.
Archery, rowing, shot put, discus, and I did hand cycling. And I do hand cycling for fun just because it's a great cardio workout and everything. And as for someone, you can't use your legs. You got to figure out some other way to stay fit and working out. So it was a great way to do it. But to competing, it blew my mind, like being able to do all these things against people who've been doing it for years, and me doing it for like 6+ months. It was kind of surreal to step back and look at all these senior guys who have been Invictus, who have been Warrior Games, and you're just trying to do the best you possibly can. But that first step was through the SRU at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and they got me into the program, and I just hit the ground running, figuratively.
Exactly. And you've got some cool tattoos that are pretty inspirational. Tell me about those.
The sheepdog, it just has to do with, there's three types of people in the world. There's sheep, wolves, and then sheepdogs, the protector of the sheep, protector of the innocent, those who can't protect themselves. So your law enforcement, your military, your pararescue, anything and everything that put others' like best of interests ahead of their own. That's what that kind of symbolizes to me. And then on the Isaiah 6:8, and then I heard the voice of the Lord say, whom shall I send and who shall go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. And myself and every other military member in law enforcement who takes that step to say, yeah, I'll go on behalf of everyone else. That's what that kind of symbolizes to me and to everyone else, I feel.
And if someone's watching who maybe has been recently injured, what would your message be?
simply don't let anyone, no matter who they are, don't let anyone limit you on your goals that you want to achieve. If they tell you can't do something, take it as a negative or reinforcement and just say, I'm gonna do it, but I'm not only gonna do it for myself, I'm gonna do it to prove everyone wrong. And it just, don't let people limit you. Because I can't tell you how many neurologists and everyone told me like the things I can and cannot do, and I proved every one of them wrong, and it was a great feeling.
Absolutely. August, you are the only pararescue amputee serving active duty in the Air Force. You were in Sangin, Afghanistan, 2011, when you were in the lead helicopter. Bullet comes in, ricochets, and somehow hits both of your legs, so you're shot through both legs. You end up at Landstuhl. Your brother re-enlists you. He's also a pararescue. And then fast forward, your leg is amputated above the knee, and yet you're competing. You're still at the 2016 Invictus Games. You rappelled out of a helicopter into the games before 10,000 people. Tell us how you did this.
Well, I mean, my story is not any dissimilar from any of these guys. You know, initial injury happens. You don't know what you're going to do with your life, and then luckily, good people in your life bring you into things like adaptive sports. I was in a pretty hard place, you know, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Went from being peak physical condition to now, oh, woe is me, I can't do this, I can't do that because they're telling me I'm not going to be able to. And then going to an adaptive sport camp where I figured out that not only could I compete, but I could win, which is very important. I like to win. But that got me in a headspace where not only was I now sitting there like, hey, now I need to start hitting the gym again. I need to start training towards things again. The Warrior Games are coming. But also it got me into a headspace where I was starting to listen to the people around me who I thought I had, you know, by isolating myself, I thought, you know, I was a loner, nobody would understand what I was going through. And then listening to the other warriors that were at these camps with me, I started realizing, like Matt said, that they're going, it didn't matter what level of injury they had, what their illness was, whatever it was, they were going through the exact same thing that I was. And that's where I kind of developed my life mantra of, you know, you're only responsible for the level of life that you've lived. It doesn't matter if the worst thing that's happened to you is a car accident, a sickness, anything. The worst thing that's happened to you is yours, and you're going to deal with it the same as anybody else, no matter what it is. So I listen to everybody, and I have learned to take in all their stories and use them as my brothers and sisters in my recovery.
You also have another phrase, little victories every day. Tell us about that. 100%.
So, you know, life's not about if you're going to fall. You are going to fall. It's guaranteed. It's all about what you do after that. A lot of people try to set huge goals for themselves, which is great, but it can be a little daunting, and they tend to give up on those goals. So in my life, I've chosen to set little victories every single day. You know, you know, it starts with making your bed or brushing your teeth, whatever you want those little goals to be. So at the end of the day, I've compiled all these little wins, and I've won that entire day. Then the next day, a whole week, a whole month, and eventually that large goal just falls into place because I've been winning throughout this entire time.
So tell us about your training now and the sports that you're involved in.
So for Invictus 2022, I did seated volleyball, I did powerlifting, hand cycling, and swimming. I was supposed to be on the track field as well, but I managed to weasel out of that because I can't stand running. But they had guys like Matt to take over, so it was great. Swimming's my power sport. I love doing it. Never competed in it. It was always just my happy place in the pool until after I got injured. They kind of pushed me to do it. Being a pararescueman, I was like, that just means I can hold my breath for a long time, not that I can swim fast, but it turns out I can. But yeah, love doing it. I love competing. I love being around these individuals, and it's like he said, just building that camaraderie. And even if you're from a different country or a different branch of the service, just all of us together competing and then coming afterwards, whoever won, and just hugging each other, and it's amazing.
How have adaptive sports changed in the last decade?
I believe it's become much larger now because everybody's more aware of it. So from companies building actual adaptive equipment for us to use, to facilities understanding and being able to get into it, to the Invictus Games and the Warrior Games and stuff like that, making that presence known. It's something that you never hear about until you need it, which is a shame, but that's the same with most things in life. You don't know about it until you need things. So I think it's become a much larger thing now, and it's great.
How have you seen adaptive sports help those that have been injured that maybe you were trying to mentor and you were having a hard time breaking through to? How is it linked to mental health?
Oh, I mean, it's 100% mental health. Like, everybody knows, whether you're adaptive or able-bodied, physical health is a key to your mental health. You have to keep some sort of physicality, and that doesn't necessarily going and hitting the gym every single day. It means, going out there, being active, living life outside of yourself. So the adaptive sports gets all of us to not only be around others that are like us, but being able to step outside our box where we didn't think things were possible and achieve those impossible goals, so to speak, and then surpass them.
Joelle, you had a spinal cord injury after a vehicle accident, and now wheelchair rugby is your thing.
Yes,
Tell us
ma'am.
about it.
I mean, wheelchair rugby is an incredible sport. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. It's one of the only, if not the only, full contact sport in a wheelchair. It's kind of like bumper cars on steroids, I guess you could say.
He's also flipped me before in a wheelchair.
I have flipped Matt before. And if you see our size differences, you'd say, how did this little man flip this big man? And it's just knowing exactly the right time to hit. There's a lot of strategy to the sport. And, to the outside eye, it just looks like we're just running around and banging. But there is a lot of strategy to the sport. And that's one of the things that brought me into the sport, is the mental aspect of it. It's not only the physical aspect, but there is a lot of pieces that move in order for this sport for you to be successful in the sport. And that's one of the things that drew me to it.
And your wife, Liani, is a wheelchair mechanic.
She is the best wheelchair mechanic. As a matter of fact, she had a family emergency, just came back from Puerto Rico, and as soon as she came back from Puerto Rico, I said, you have some wrenching to do. She had to fix some things on my everyday chair and in my rugby chair as well, so she's incredible. She'll go out there with my daughter in her hands, fix what she needs to fix. As a matter of fact, at these last Warrior Games, I was coaching Team Army, and one of our starters got a flat tire as we were warming up. And the referee comes up to me and goes, you guys have a minute and a half to start. I said, you have a minute and a half to fix this tire? She didn't only fix one, she fixed two in that minute and a half.
She's like a pit crew.
She is.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So tell me about your darkest day and how sports got you through.
So I was actually injured for 2 years before my darkest day started. You would expect me to be in the most happy spot. My son was just born. We had just closed on a new house. And here I am, I'm thinking I'm 2 years post-injury, still trying to figure out how do I take care of myself, and then I have a baby. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm trying to figure out how I take care of myself, and I have to take care of another human. So it just slowly started spiraling, started going to a negative spot. And then every time I would kind of get to the bottom of the pit, I'm like, I'm just gonna go out, I'm getting my rugby chair, go push 6 miles. So I'd go push 6 miles. Then I started strength training, doing all that other stuff, and I was probably in that dark place for about a year, and then, after a while, I didn't even realize it was gone. It just kept on training, kept on working out, getting into a community with my adaptive sports, and after a while, it was just back to normal. It was just everyday life for me.
What's next for you?
Hopefully the Paralympics, but I still have a long road to get there. Definitely a lot of training still have to do, a lot of learning in the sport, and hopefully I'll be there. I'm striving for LA.
What if people are out there and they've just been injured, or they maybe were injured a while ago and haven't found adaptive sports? How do they take that first step?
So even if it's not an adaptive sport, I always tell I work a lot with the VA, new injuries at the VA, and I always tell them just get uncomfortable. If you get comfortable, you're not gonna try anything new, and if you step out of your comfort zone, you're gonna, whether it's working out, whether it's even gaming. I know a lot of adaptive gamers, as well as, I always ask people, what did you like to do before you got hurt? I've heard fishing. You can modify a fishing pole and fish the same way that you were fishing before you got hurt. So I would say just get uncomfortable and don't be afraid to fail at trying something new.
Mm-hmm. Great. James, you are Vice President of Physical Health and Wellness at the Wounded Warrior Project. You're a physiologist and a professional coach. Tell us how exercise reduces stress and combat depression.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm grateful to be up here with these amazing athletes. I think what you hear through all of their messages over and over again is the power of sport, the power of camaraderie, the power of being around their brothers and sisters in their community that elevated them, that helped them compete, that helped them get through some pretty dark times. We have a number of physically focused programs at Wounded Warrior Project. Soldier Ride program is a cycling program that introduces our veterans into cycling modalities of all types. We have an adaptive sports specific program. And the interesting thing is we see our warriors come to us for physically focused reasons. They want to lose weight, they want to get more active, they might want to get stronger. And one of the most interesting things we see is the first thing that improves is mood. The energy goes up. Their memory goes up, they start sleeping better, and they see all these complementing benefits of physical movement. I think one of my colleagues up here mentioned it before, able-bodied or adaptive, if you're moving, you are generally going to feel better. There's all kinds of great stuff happening in your brain. And so mental health is one of the biggest things that we see as an improvement from participating in sport. I think I saw a study on va.gov showed a huge decrease in tension, anxiety, and depression for individuals that are participating in recreational adaptive sports programs. And so I'm going to stand behind that all day and get our warriors as active as we can.
It's really interesting you should say that, because when I had cancer a decade ago, a stage 3 breast cancer. Every time before chemo, I would go out for a run. And I believed in my head it was to oxygenate my blood and take the chemo in, but it helped with the mental space. And so I have talked to more cancer patients over the years about just get outside and move before you go into chemo, or every day, make sure you move. Tell me more about some of the athletes that you've encountered, James, who these adaptive sports either changed their lives or that they were in a really dark space. Are there any particular cases that you can recall?
Yeah, many. I've got an individual that just retired from the Air Force a couple of years ago. He gave me a ride to the airport a handful of years back after a physical health and wellness expo, and he had been introduced to Wounded Warrior Project through our Soldier Ride cycling program. As he was dropping me off at the airport, he mentioned to me that he had written his goodbye letters. He was sitting under an overpass on the interstate and ready to take his life. And he got a call from one of our Wounded Warrior Project teammates, happened to somehow talk him into changing his mind and getting him involved. He started riding a bike and started feeling the wind on his face and feeling better. And little by little, somehow, his mental health started to improve, and recognized that his family and his life and all the things that he wanted to do were much more important than the act that he was getting ready to take. And so, he thanked me profusely for introducing him to sport, and he is still staying active to this day. I mean, he sends me messages periodically letting me know, how he's doing with his weight training and his biking and whatnot. And so, like I said, it's such a powerful thing to get people out there moving. The World Health Organization says 150 minutes a week of moderate activity. And that's not heavy lifting, that's not CrossFit, that's not being super active. That's just getting out there and walking and getting some sunshine on your face. We want people to get that message.
And just lastly, where can people go to find out more about these Wounded Warrior Project projects?
Yeah, so woundedwarriorproject.org is the easiest place you can find us. You can call our resource center at 888-WWP-ALUM. We use the term alumni for our Wounded Warrior Project members, and we're there for whatever you need at no cost to the veteran.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being with us. When we return, our conversation focuses on issues surrounding physical and mental health. Stay with us as the Wounded Warrior Experience continues.
The Wounded Warrior Experience is presented by the Wounded Warrior Project and Boeing, with support from American Military University and American Airlines. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center. Visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org to learn more.
Our commitment to veterans is part of who we are. As you transition to the next mission, we are here for you every step of the way. Our team is dedicated to helping you find that right opportunity, and we value your skills and your commitment to being role models. We see your support for the community and how much the community supports you. Boeing is proud to partner with veterans and their families because that's our duty to you.
As Americans, it's our responsibility to ensure those who fought and sacrificed for our nation receive the support they earned. Wounded Warrior Project exists to fulfill that promise. In the military, there's a saying, "I've got your six," which really means I've got your back. I'll be there when you need me most. Visit woundedwarriorproject.org/notalone to see how your support makes sure veterans know we've got their six.
The Wounded Warrior Experience is presented by Boeing and the Wounded Warrior Project, with support from American Military University, Leidos, and Luke's Wings. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center. Visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org to learn more.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Boeing and Wounded Warrior Project. According to the project's annual Warrior Survey, up to 75% of veterans reported PTSD, anxiety, or depression as a result of their service. In our next segment, we spotlight the health challenges facing warriors and the resources available to them. Joining us now are Aaron Fletcher, Warrior Care Network Director for Wounded Warrior Project, Brendan Quisenberry, Green Beret Special Forces combat veteran representing Transcend Foundation, and Michael Schlitz, retired Army Sergeant First Class, wounded in Iraq, now serving as ambassador for the Robert Irvine Foundation. Thank you all for joining us. Aaron, let me start with you. This survey from the Wounded Warrior Project that found that 75% of warriors who served are facing some form of depression or PTSD. Then there's also that 1 in 5 warriors reported experiencing barriers to mental health care, often due to stigma associated with mental health. What is this telling you about the state of the post-9/11 veterans' mental health? This is clearly a crisis, and what are you at Wounded Warrior Project doing about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think what the data that you're highlighting shows is that the invisible wounds, that as we call it, these mental health challenges, are more common at this point than physical injuries. And we're really looking to bring some awareness to that and have the conversations around mental health care, around easy access to high quality mental health care, in the same way that we're talking so comfortably about our physical health. That's really going to help decrease the stigma around mental health care. It's going to encourage veterans to seek the care that can help them recover.
Tell me about the 1 year's worth of mental health care during a 2 to 3 week intensive outpatient program. That's one of your principal programs.
So that's our Warrior Care Network program. That's our collaboration with 4 academic medical centers across the country, providing mental health treatment for the invisible wounds that you talked about. It's a year's worth of treatment in that 2-week model. 91% of the participants that go through this program complete it, compared to 50% in other clinical programs, and the results are incredible. They're achieving clinically significant reductions in post-traumatic stress, in traumatic brain injury symptoms. It provides integrated substance use treatment, which we also know is often concurrent with post-traumatic stress.
Is there some approach that you're finding is working better than, right now we're hearing that people can't get in to see mental health specialists after the pandemic, as well as, so it's not just veterans who are facing a mental health crisis. What's working best right now?
Absolutely. So what works best is that comprehensive and holistic approach. And so within Warrior Care Network, we're addressing both the mental health challenges, physical health challenges. We're addressing the family component. Participants that go through this program don't go through it alone. We want them to have support when they're back home, and taking a very tailored approach to treatment. This is not an area where we can take that cookie cutter approach and assume what works for one individual, it's going to be the most appropriate for the next individual, really holistic and tailored.
And right now, there are statistics suggesting 1 in 4 post-9/11 vets had suicidal thoughts in the last 12 months. What are you doing about the shortage of mental health care specialists? And what should people do if they need help?
If they need help, to talk about it. This is something that can feel very shameful. It can feel as though it's embarrassing to talk about, but we know that there's treatment that works. We know that there's access, and it doesn't take a mental health professional to be the first person to broach that conversation.
Thank you, Erin. Brendan, you were a Green Beret for many years, Special Forces, you combat veteran, you served in the 82nd Airborne, you were in Afghanistan, you went straight from Iraq to Afghanistan for 15 months. You've also participated in 7,000 skydives, you were with 7th Group. Tell me about your experience. How did combat impact your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say what a pleasure to be here and be able to share any of these experiences. As far as the mental health piece, I guess it's funny how it slowly just kind of builds up over time, and especially in our community with either a special operations community or really military, community as a whole, we're kind of always trained to, suck it up and drive on, and we kind of push through those kind of, barriers as far as what we might be dealing with or feeling and everything. But it just eventually slowly just kind of builds up. The amount of combat and everything starts to just kind of catch up to you. And what was interesting is that as I was starting to have quite a bit of struggles with definitely the PTS and everything, I noticed what was interesting is the amount of stress that I was starting to bring onto my family as well. And what's interesting is that I realized that not a lot of people, I guess it's not really talked about as far as secondary PTS and what exactly is secondary PTS, and how that kind of drifts into the family and the home front and onto your possible spouse and your kids and everything. So not only was I starting to have struggles and kind of probably showing that on a day-to-day basis within my life with my wife and family and everything, but they were starting to kind of get residual effects of that, and then kind of fearing what I might do next, and they were kind of going through like almost micro traumas of themselves, dealing with my primary PTS and almost their secondary PTS. So it was pretty interesting to start working with other foundations to where they recognize that and start to be able to kind of address and treat that.
And you started your own foundation, the Transcend Foundation. What is that all about? And it has to do with, I thought it was very interesting, it deals with, you found that there are hormonal deficiencies in these special operators or firemen and rescue people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, back into the community, it's funny because as service members and you start to join from 18 to, you got to think like, 28 or 30, that's your peak time in life, right? I mean, that's when you're the healthiest, the most physically fit, everything. Your hormones are probably the most balanced, and we love that aspect, right? And then, but what was interesting and the correlation was the amount of stress that a lot of service members during those peak periods of their time were drastically suffering from the amount of hormonal irregularities going on, with incredible amounts of low testosterone, DHEA, thyroid, vitamin D issues, and it's not so hard to think about, well, where did that come from? And when the training was compounding, the combat deployments of overseas were going on so much, doing missions at night, sleeping during the day, all of that was just it's throwing everything off out of whack. And so we started looking at that holistically and started addressing those issues, and it was really starting to help.
And so Transcend Foundation is where you can go if you want more information. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Brendan.
No.
Michael, you've worked with a number of groups over the years. We've known each other from these panels. Tell me what you're doing now and who you're working with.
Yes, I've been very blessed to work with a lot of great organizations, and I've known Chef Irvine for about 10 years. So I've seen Robert Irvine, and I've gotten to see him give back to the veteran communities, first responder communities, and so I wanted to be more involved in, being able to support his, food and mental health and physical wellness programs, community-based programs, and financial, because when we talk about mental health, there's stressors. We know that there's different stressors. There's stressors in the home, there's stressors with finances. So the more that we can look at it a big picture, that yes, post-traumatic stress is a big deal, but there's a lot more stressors involved.
And you were, your own situation, you were in Baghdad 2010, you were blown up, burned over 85% of your body. How did you pull yourself through?
It was, at the very beginning, obviously, I think a lot of people who would go through a situation like that, it was dark days. Not having a sense of purpose, not knowing what the future would hold, not being able to do anything for myself. But I had a great support network, my veterans, my family, organizations that stepped up and came to my aid. And that really pushed me to the next step, and wanting to give back to the veteran communities, looking at the Vietnam veterans and what they went through when they came home, and how much they gave back so we could have the benefits we have. That's what I want to do now. I want to work with these organizations to be able to give back.
So how do we reach the isolated veterans? Because what we're seeing in terms of the spike of suicides, it's people who are getting isolated. What are you doing? What's the best approach for Americans to take right now?
Right now, it's look at what your local communities are doing. National organizations are great. We can reach the big cities a lot of times, but the smaller communities, it's the veterans in those communities that need to reach out to the brothers and sisters in arms and say, hey, you're not alone. I'm here to help. Even if it's just going for a walk or taking going off and doing an activity. It's not like the old days where it's just, hey, let's go to the bar and get drunk. Life is way more important than that.
And that's where the Robert Irvine Foundation, the Transcend Foundation, and Wounded Warrior Project come in. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all. In our final segment, we'll discuss veterans advocacy and the timely issue of toxic exposure when the Wounded Warrior Experience concludes, right after this.
The Wounded Warrior Experience is presented by the Wounded Warrior Project and Boeing, with support from American Airlines, Military Times, and the Robert Irvine Foundation. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center. Visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org to learn more.
RPG came through the belly of the aircraft. I'm not sure I would still be here if I didn't find the Friends and Wounded Warrior Project that I did. We don't talk about the female combat wounded. These are our daughters and our sisters and our mothers. Being on the recumbent, it felt a lot like flight, and I felt like I got a piece of me back. The truth is, I think we all have this strength inside of us, but until you're tested, you just don't know it's there.
Our commitment to veterans is part of who we are. As you transition to the next mission, we are here for you every step of the way. Our team is dedicated to helping you find that right opportunity, and we value your skills and your commitment to being role models. We see your support for the community and how much the community supports you. Boeing is proud to partner with veterans and their families because that's our duty to you.
The Wounded Warrior Experience is presented by Boeing and the Wounded Warrior Project, with support from Leidos, Transcend Foundation, and Veterans United Home Loans. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center. Visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org to learn more.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Wounded Warrior Project and Boeing. Advocating for those who have sacrificed is a mission that continues long after veterans have returned from the battlefield. For instance, this past August, years-long efforts by the Wounded Warrior Project and other service organizations paid off with the passage of the PACT Act, legislation that addresses disabilities from burn pits and other toxins and represents the largest expansion of benefits in VA history. Joining us to discuss this exciting news and other developments are Alex Murawski, Government Affairs Deputy Director for Wounded Warrior Project, twice deployed to Iraq with the 101st Airborne. He testified before Congress on the issue of toxic exposure. Dr. Donald Kosiak, Army physician with 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, currently Chief Medical Officer for Leidos. And Cole Lyle, Marine Corps veteran of Afghanistan and Executive Director of Mission Roll Call. Gentlemen, welcome. Alex, I'll start with you. Tell us about the PACT Act, how significant it is, how many people will be affected by its passage, and how did Wounded Warrior Project help support the legislation you yourself testified before Congress?
Yes, certainly, Jennifer. Thanks for that question, and thanks for having us here to talk about this issue. The PACT Act addresses a major issue for the post-9/11 generation, which is exposure to burn pits and other toxic substances in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and then consequently illnesses that develop years later. Prior to the passage of the PACT Act, many veterans were unable to access VA health care and benefits because they couldn't necessarily prove that these injuries were connected to their service the way you often can with physical injuries. But now, as a result of the passage of the PACT Act, there are now 20 new presumptive disabilities that if a veteran served in an area where burn pits are known to have been used and now has one of these cancers or severe respiratory conditions, they can be granted VA benefits. And the PACT Act also guarantees access to VA health care to every veteran who served around burn pits, whether or not they already have one of these conditions, so that way that they have access as an at-risk population to screening, early detection, and rapid treatment if necessary.
And this also deals with Agent Orange and other toxins. So talk about what people should be doing, and there's some deadlines coming up, aren't there?
There's one major deadline, especially for the healthcare piece that I just mentioned. Post-9/11 combat veterans who were discharged more than 10 years ago have 1 year to enroll in VA healthcare. That began on October 1st, 2022, and it ends on October 1st, 2023. We're calling that the open enrollment period. We're strongly recommending that every eligible veteran take advantage of this open enrollment period, even if they don't have any symptoms right now. They earn this eligibility, and that way the health care will be there if they need it.
I was very surprised to read that half of all veterans are unaffiliated with the VA or VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations. So that is really important. If you're going to get coverage under the PACT Act, and if you were exposed to burn pits or Agent Orange, you really need to sign up for your VA benefits so that then you'll be covered. What else do you think how did you get involved personally with this issue? Were you exposed to burn pits, I assume?
Well, I served 2 tours in Iraq, and I did serve on a base where there were burn pits. I'm very lucky that I don't have any symptoms, and I'm also enrolled in VA healthcare due to some other injuries that I sustained while I was serving. But this issue, I'm an advocate for my fellow veterans, and this is a major issue for the post-9/11 veterans generation. And so that's why I'm involved in this issue, because it's so very important.
It really is extraordinary. How many bases have burn pits, or how widespread was the issue?
You know, it's hard to say, but when we're talking about veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, we say potentially all of them were exposed. Potentially all 3.5 million veterans who served in Iraq and Afghanistan were exposed to burn pits.
Very interesting. So if you served in Iraq or Afghanistan, you really should sign up for these VA benefits.
Absolutely.
Donald, tell me about your involvement with this very, very important piece of legislation and the whole burn pit issue.
Well, thank you again for having us. I've been involved in the issue both from a personal standpoint, being a veteran myself and receiving care at the VA. It's very important to myself and my family, but to Leidos as well. A company like Leidos with 40,000 employees, 20% of them are veterans. And so we have an interest in helping solve this problem for our veteran brethren and sisters. Leidos itself does a lot of the disability exams on behalf of the VA to help people become eligible for the benefits that they deserve. And so we are ramping up, if you will, in order to provide those services. So today, we're providing 4,200 exams every single day to veterans in 39 countries, adjudicating their claims to receive their benefits.
So what was it like before for veterans, before the PACT Act was passed and this benefit was extended? What would it be like if you thought you had been exposed to a burn pit and had a lung cancer, for instance?
Right, so this concept of being a presumptive diagnosis is really important. Before, we would spend lots of time as the individual trying to prove that this was a cause of my service. So I would have to say that all the other things didn't cause this cancer or this lung disease or this hypertension, and it has to be only the cause for my deployment. Under this new wave of information, now I can say, if I have those things, we're going to presume that it happened because of the burn pit or because of the Agent Orange or the other toxic exposures, which makes it really easy and convenient for veterans to get the benefits they deserve.
So it's basically giving them the benefit of the doubt, whereas they were doubted before if they came in and thought that something was related to their service.
Correct. Like anything else, when you have to prove something happened or something didn't happen because of it, it makes it more difficult. And so much so, you say that 50% weren't even enrolled in the VA system, not even going after the benefits that they were entitled to. And so this is where we come in. We try to help open up those doors. We do things like mobile clinics. We'll go to the home of the veteran to enroll them in their benefits exams, sometimes literally on their deathbed, so that we can ensure that they get the benefits they deserve and their family gets to continue those benefits after they're gone.
And when they talk about the 20 new presumptive conditions, what are those conditions, or what are some
those
of
conditions? There's a long list of them. There's fancy cancer names that I hope none of you ever have to understand what they mean. There's a bunch of lung conditions. There's some things around chronic sinusitis. It's very easy, though, to go search if you're interested. The VA has put them right on the middle of their webpage. Yeah, if you do va.gov, they will pull up those conditions, and that's for burn pits. There's also the new diagnoses that are things like hypertension for Agent Orange. So again, if you're a veteran of any age, of any group, please go out, look at the list, and register.
And there's a deadline. So the 1-year deadline, they need to register. Cole, tell me about Mission Roll Call and your mission and why you set this up.
Yeah, thank you for having us here. Mission Roll Call is a national advocacy program. As you mentioned, 50% of veterans are not enrolled in VA healthcare, and even fewer use it on a regular basis. So our number one priority is suicide prevention. We advocate on behalf of the veterans that opt into our text and email polls about issues under consideration by Congress that they're debating on. So we pushed out several polls while the discussions between the House and the Senate versions of the PACT Act were going on to give them instantaneous feedback about what veterans thought about different policies under consideration. Because suicide prevention, again, is our number one priority, and it's such a complicated, nuanced issue to try to tackle for a number of different reasons. We can get involved in all sorts of different kind of policy discussions. The PACT Act was one, because obviously if you're struggling with cancer or any sort of healthcare issue, access to healthcare, access to benefit, that's going to be a huge stressor that could lead to somebody spiraling down that path to making an irreversible decision.
And if you've already are experiencing mental health issues and then you have a physical diagnosis like a cancer, it really is so important to have that safety net. Tell me about your own experience. You were a Marine. What effect did combat have on you, and is this personal for you?
Yeah, so I served in Helmand Province in Afghanistan in 2011. I didn't serve near a burn pit per se, but there was a waste facility pretty close to where I was. When I got out, the reason I got involved in advocacy was because I had a suicide attempt back in 2014. Talk therapy and traditional treatments hadn't worked for me. So she's not here right now, but I have a service dog named Kaya that I got that helped out with those symptoms. But the VA at the time didn't fund that. So that was kind of how my initial foray into politics and veteran policy started. And I kind of found my purpose doing this again, trying to help other veterans through similar things. And so that's why I'm here.
Why do you think that we're having such an uptick in the suicide rate? The war is over. What are you seeing, Alex, and what can be done?
Well, as far as what can be done, Wounded Warrior projects, mental health programming, is we have Warrior Connection. We have the ability for warriors to talk to somebody on their own terms. And we also have intensive outpatient mental health treatment that we fund for warriors, as appropriate, called our Warrior Care Network. So this is what Wounded Warrior Project.
Those are amazing resources. Donna, what are you seeing, and what do you think needs to be done that isn't being done?
Well, if you look at our calendar, right, about a little more than 20 years ago, there was an event, 9/11, and now those people that have stayed in the service are starting to retire from the service. And we find the riskiest point for veterans is when they leave the military. They leave that family unit that they've called home for a long time, and then they transition into the world, and they have to do things like pick out something to wear every day and to learn how to interact with a different group of people. And when you lose that support group and you haven't tied into a new one, it can be a very hard transition. And this is where groups like we're talking about today, being involved in some group, some kind of activity, will bring you a place that you can find some balance, whatever that balance is for you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. On behalf of the American Veterans Center, thank you for being with us for this year's discussion of the Wounded Warrior Experience. A special thank you goes to our presenting sponsors, Boeing and Wounded Warrior Project. With support from Transcend Foundation, Robert Irvine Foundation, Leidos, Military Times, Luke's Wings, Veterans United Home Loans, American Military University, American Airlines, the Jamarmi Company, and Mr. Patrick Porter. And to all of our servicemen and women of every generation, thank you for your service.
If you or someone you know suffered military toxic exposures and you think you may be eligible for benefits or health care under the PACT Act, go to va.gov/PACT for more information.